Hello again and welcome to Prime Lenses. I'm Ian. My guest today is Thorsten Overgaard, a Danish photographer and teacher of photography. In a long career, he's made images around the world. Full disclosure, this is a long interview. I was very excited to talk to Thorsten and we just ended up chatting for ages. I'm also learning something about putting together the podcast that when I say that's a lovely note to end on, that usually means we've got at least 15 minutes before we actually end on a note. But he was very generous with his time and I really enjoyed hearing his thoughts on the importance of finding the fun in photography as well as being prepared, and our shared love of imperfect lenses. He also has some insights into Leica which, considering he's so synonymous with the brand and those cameras, you might not expect. He's definitely not completely sold on the M11 yet. Anyway, I've tried to keep it to time, but like I say, it was fun. And if you want to know more about the lenses and cameras that we talk about in this episode, you can subscribe to the newsletter and I'll put a full list there. The newsletter usually goes out the following Wednesday. So without further ado, here's Thorsten.
Yeah.
It's fun to see in your background there that you have what most people would use as a coat rack. But that's quite the selection of M bodies you've got back there. Are they all M's? Yeah. It looks like there's a couple of film ones.
No, there's a few mini looks and film cameras, and then there's more in the closet. I actually thought about hanging like a couple of more so I could have everything hanging. I wasn't sure I wanted to hang it like that when I made the new office here a few months ago. And I actually had one R9 film camera I dropped because it didn't have a strap, it just had a hand strap, and then I was moving something and then boom. So there goes the 80mm, but it's fine. It's like they go back and forth to get repaired now and then, you know, so yeah.
Yeah.
What is the glasses you have? You have recording glasses also?
Yes. So being kind of like borderline obsessed with photography, I have the Snap spectacles. These are from about 2015. And I put prescription lenses in them so that I would always have so it's taking your mantra of always wear a camera, but taking it very seriously and putting them on my face. And it's a very low quality camera, but it's you're still image making. It has a look, right? Like it has this kind of like 2013 sort of smartphone kind of aesthetic, and it's a circular crop as well. So when you're watching the videos or the pictures back on your phone, you can kind of rotate it round and sort of see the picture looking. And so it's kind of interesting. It sort of captures video at 60 FPS as well. So it's very lifelike. It's very kind of like being back there. And they did some 3D ones as well that were really incredible for putting you back in the place where you were, you know.
But that's great, crazy. 2015. That's like
Yeah, they're not. I mean, they're not high quality. You kind of fast forward to now, and there's the Ray-Ban ones that I've got, the Meta ones, which are much higher quality. Like they're insane quality, but they've done a software update in the last couple of months, which has kind of ruined them because they do HDR hyper saturated, like hyper bright, in a way that the images are kind of unusable. Because they're just so saturated and so bright. You just look at them and they're hard to look at now. And I know that was kind of their plan, was to just like they're going to AI the crap out of it or whatever. But like it's made the product worse. And it's this funny thing of cameras that are increasingly computers, which are the opposite of these, but because there's no consistency. So you just turn it on one day and your product has changed. And so as a photographer or a videographer, like you can't rely on this thing because it's suddenly changed and you can't turn it off. It's just on the whole time. So it's sort of fascinating. No, it's a weird change that's coming across the industry where you just can't, I don't know, like unless you're going for these very, very specific tools that are not accessible to everyone as well, but that are very manual and very kind of like, you know, everything else that everyone's using, a phone, their glasses or whatever, they're just getting further and further removed from any control over the image. And I fear that may make people feel like they can't interfere with it, or they'll just have to find ever more weird and wonderful ways to do it.
I mean, I believe there is like people in the world that are very specific of what they want. And then there's a lot of people that they just don't have a very high level, and that's not try to talk down, but I mean that goes in food and electronics and everything. It's just like this is what's offered, and that will do, and it's a commercial interest, and and then I think it's your responsibility, your personal responsibility, that if you want to have real sound, high fidelity, or real pictures, or real food, or real any experience, then you have to control it yourself, you know. And that is not a mass market. That's not what offered in the mass market, because I mean, especially in the US, it's a marketing nation more than that they're actually good at doing stuff. It's just, can you sell it? So there's a lot of stuff being sold that just it sells really well, and it does really well. But it's not actually doing anything for anybody that it's supposed to, except it makes money. And that goes hospitals, food, you name it. It's just like...
I think I really only understood that on a recent trip to the US. I've been going to the US more and more. And I think it's when you go a lot, you start to sort of see a difference. The television behind me, that's turned off, is a Samsung frame, which is by all accounts a bad television. But it sells tremendously well because it has the magic trick of being able to be left on and pretending to be a picture, because a lot of people aren't using their television necessarily as much as they used to, but they want one. And so it sits on their wall and it pretends to be a painting. It pretends to be something else. It makes you feel better about the fact that you have this big hulking great thing on your wall because you can pretend it's art. And a lot of people are then just looking at things on their phone. But it is, by all accounts, not a very good TV. Like it's like the glasses, it's of like a 2015 sort of vintage in terms of the technology that's in it, but it does that one thing. It's a
but then that could be a nice thing. I mean, I had my daughter-in-law has a Leica Deluxe 7 now. She uses, and but at one point she was looking. She wanted to get a 2020-2005 camera because she liked the whole look of it, and maybe Lana Del Rey or somebody else was using it, so that was then suddenly was like, wow, that's exciting. I don't know where she got the idea from, but I kind of like that you go back to that. It's kind of like, I mean, I sold all my vinyl back when CD came out, and then now I'm getting it again, but I don't have the vinyl equipment. I don't have the record player. The rest of it is high end, but not the record player, and I don't do anything to play the vinyl really well, but I buy vinyl again. I just bought the new Van Morrison coming out here in a couple of weeks. So it's just for sometimes I just want to put it on and enjoy that the vinyl jumps up and down and there's dust on it, and it only lasts 20 minutes, then you have to turn it around. So I think that's still valid, and if not for anything else, then you get to see why high definition streaming or whatever you're doing is actually a nice thing. But but you learn from that, just like going back to film now and then. So
How much film do you shoot? So we can get into a little bit of like where you started, because I'm assuming you started with film sometime.
I don't know if I generally think that starting from year 0 and move forward is a little bit dull, but so we can start with something else, because I can tell a story. We were in Japan here for 2 weeks, and then we went to Paris and London to do workshops. But in Japan, because we like Japan, so I had a 3-day workshop in Kyoto, and I had to take some photos mainly in Tokyo. But then because we were there longer, we could offer the magazine that I can go to wherever you have the people. So we got to some interesting places. And one thing that happened every time I went to the Leica store in Ginza in Tokyo, so that's like the first Leica store in the world, and it's like the most beautiful. It's like silk on the walls and marble and what have you. So that was the first one. It was really expensive to make, and it's made in Japanese style, so things are hidden. So you come in, and if you came into the store like 2012, 2010, you come in and there's no cameras to see, except there's like 6-7 cameras on the counter, which is like, I mean, it's half a square meter or something, of cameras, and the rest is just empty store. Very simplistic and very Steve Jobs in a way, or Apple Store idea in a way. And then the Japanese thing is that when you ask for a lens, then they open the wall, and in behind the wall they have the lenses, and they can take them out.
Right.
And they're resting in there in calfskin leather or something like that. And then on the table they would have the Leica MP.
Mm-hmm.
And the Leica MP is kind of the classic film Leica, at least for me. I mean, it's a new one. I think the Leica MP they started making in 2002 or something, but for me it's almost like that has been around forever. So you see this black paint, and it has a chrome around the shutter release, and it's just a beautiful, simple camera. And I would look at that each time, and I was just like, and usually I would be there doing a workshop over 3 days, so I had like 3, 4, 5 days to fall in love with this camera again, and then I would, and film is very big in Japan, and it was back then also, so I'd fall in love with it, and then day by day I would just talk myself out of it.
Right.
Because I have 10, 15, how many film cameras at home that I don't use, so why would I get another film camera? And by the way, I have the Leica M4 that is very close to this. And that way I ended up going to Japan for more than 10 years, and every time I talked myself out of it. And then this time I was in Japan, and I went to, I was in Kyoto, and then I think this is the right place to get a Leica MP. And we were in the Leica store Kyoto, but I forget to ask about it. And I sent them an email after the workshop, do you have the MP in stock? And nobody answered, so I was like, okay, it doesn't happen. And then I went to, around Japan, I went to Tokyo. And then I went into the Leica store in Tokyo and talked to the store manager, Takahashi-san, and said, hey, you have the MP? And I said, I'm not sure we have any, but then he found one in the back, and I hold it for a bit. And then I said, no, let me just sleep on it. I'll come back and pick it up tomorrow if I needed it. Mm-hmm. And then I talked myself out of it again. So I've been going there, but somehow, so here's the thing, is like somehow going to Japan, that's where you get a Leica MP, rather than ordering it online in the US or go to even to Wetzlar, to the factory. It has to be from that store.
Yeah.
And the whole thinking of this was that when I was around Japan, I was thinking like, no, I could get into shooting film. I'll just put in some color film, and then somehow the whole mood of Japan was like, no, I could do this. And I also had like this, I've been saying to a few people and workshop students and joked with it that, you know, I would go exciting place in the world. And you can, Tokyo is definitely an exciting place. There's lots of exciting places I go in Asia and whatever. And I kind of come in, I do my workshop for 3 days, and then I'm out of there. Sometimes the last evening after the workshop I leave, or the day after. And sometimes like, why, like, how is it going to be when I'm 90? I said, oh, I went to Tokyo all these times. Like, what do you see? Well, I just walked around the street, photographed, and got out of there. I never feel like I'm going to go look. I definitely don't look as a tourist. I don't want to see all the tourist things, but I should see something else, not with as a workshop.
Yeah.
And then part of the joke is like, maybe I should just like, I finish a workshop, and that's usually I shoot with M11 or M10 or M9 or whatever I use. And then I put that aside, and then I take my film camera and I turn on a completely different identity. So now I'm going to be another person. I'm going to shoot film. And that's how close, I got really close to it this time, that's what I would do, because I had 2 weeks in Japan for myself, and I could just shoot film and pretend that I could just imagine anybody I could be. I can just make a whole new identity. So that might happen one day, but that's the film story. But you could say, of course, then if we go back, so that was like maybe the more recent and exciting thing. Then if you go back, you could say the Leica M6 came out in 2002 again. No, 2022. So I got that, and I went to New York specifically to shoot film and digital. So I used the Leica SL that's from the 60s or 70s. Film camera that I really used a lot in the past. And then I had the it must have been the M11 I had side by side, or maybe it was M10, and then the M6. And I would shoot film, and I would turn it into the lab in New York. They have a really good lab there. And then they would scan it and send me a download when I was back home. And then some days or weeks later, they would send the actual film back, which doesn't matter at that point. So I was shooting with this side by side. And so also, I don't like to do comparison, but there I actually did comparison. I see, okay, this street, I find some extreme light reflecting in the skyscraper against the camera. So I shoot it with first one camera, then the other camera. And then when I came home, I would experiment, okay, let me see, how much can I change the film look? And you can change the film look a lot, which is a blessing. You don't have to worry about that. But now you're used to that, you can change it. So then I go digital and said, can I get the film look on the digital files? And I could, and I made some presets out of it. And literally, it's like I find a picture from that week in New York, and I cannot tell from the picture, is this the film one or is it the digital one? Especially if you add film grain to it in Capture One Pro, then you can't tell anything anymore. So that kind of, so you could say that thing going back to film for a few weeks in New York and at home made me once again realize why I like to shoot digital and why I do it. But also I got something from shooting film again. It's kind of like you touch your roots. It's kind of like the same. If you went back to vinyl, you will see, wow, this is what I loved about it. I love to go to the record store. You listen to a record 3 or 4 times before you buy it, and then you listen to the whole thing. And the whole album was a story. There was a communication in the album. Now it's not like that anymore, and so on. But anyways, so that's when I put film back on the shelves 2 years ago. And then you could say before that, until 2004, 2006, I shot slide film. So I used the R8, R9, and a lot of the Leica SL, which is the first SLR film camera Leica made, and it feels like an M. It's very sturdy. It's like a tank, and the shutter sound is amazing. So that one I used a lot all over the world. And you could say back then when I did assignments, I would shoot them on slide film, turn it into the lab, and get it. If I had to, I would get an hour later, else I would just pick it up next day. And I would scan it on an Imacon scanner or Nikon scanner, and remove the dust and all this stuff. You know. And so that's kind of like the last time I really produced a lot of film, and I think I really managed to refine it. And this is the film I use, this is the lab I use, this is how I deal with the scans and so on. And then of course you could say when I got into photography originally when I was like 30 or something, that was film, and I had my own dark room. I rolled my own film, and it was like, I mean, everything was black and white. I didn't have a color lab in my house. So that was like entirely different style, and it's something like I can recall the moments of being in the basement and developing, and the smell of it, and it gets really hot and you're sweaty, but it's like exciting, and I would experiment a lot with different ways, different technology of developing film. But I mean, I know I'm not I'm not doing that again. I have a neighbor like 5 minutes away. He sent me some pictures of he's doing like state of the art darkroom. He's semi-retired, and he has the money and somehow the enthusiasm to do this. And I'm like, amazing. But I mean, I wouldn't even go there to hang out for an evening to make pictures. It's just like no. So that's changed, but I still think a lot of the things. I mean, in general, everything I do with books, workflow, and everything is I always reference back to what is the true way of doing it, which means how was it done originally, and why was it done to begin with, and why was it done that way. And you could say in workflow, I mean the digital workflow that I teach in books and video classes and also in my workshops is based on how we used to do photography 150 years ago, and back in the 70s, that you select your pictures, you don't burn the negative, you don't travel around with your negative to edit, like you develop, you finish some final prints, and that's the photos you made of it, and then you store everything. It's not an endless process that you put it in the cloud and all this stuff that is offered, which is marketing these days, speaking of which, but so that's my film story, but I think I'll get into it again, but I have to almost go, not even a project, it just have to be, you can have a completely different viewpoint. I look at some of the guys on Instagram and elsewhere that does film, and I'm like, fuck, that looks amazing. Then you look closer and see it's actually not that amazing quality.
No.
And even the viewpoint, the way they travel, there's one guy that then he happened to go to Copenhagen, and I like the color and the style and everything of it. And then I see the only place he went in Copenhagen is the most touristy places. So that also part of the viewpoint that like, yeah, he shot film and he does like this, but he actually only goes to tourist places, which seems to work for him, but that's not what I would do, you know. But anyways, so that's gonna be film is for later. When I get older and more experienced, I can enter into film and see how I can make something out of that.
We can all be chasing people like Andre Wagner, who just make it look easy and just make incredible, impactful work, and also just happen to develop it, you know, in their own studio in New York, and you know.
Yeah, but that is, I mean, in a way that is, well, it's always a dream to have your own style, and you can say, I feel, at least I have my own style in the way that I decide what I do and when I take a photo and how I do it, and somehow that works for me. And if I go back and look, there was a photographer in Denmark that I worked with a lot, and he shot black and white with Pentax. So he had the Pentax with a wooden handle, and he had a good guy in the darkroom, and it was just his whole workflow of how he worked with that camera and those lenses, and he wasn't like a nerd about it at all, but he was just. So he did a lot of actors and celebrities and for magazines, and I was just like, is Robin Skjoldborg is his name, but that look was just like, damn, this is beautiful, and it was. Yeah. And the moment he got a digital camera, you could just see it was like that was not easy, and somehow he found back to a redefined style, but not that certainty that he had there. But I mean. It's unlikely that he would just keep shooting film forever, you know. It's like, it's just,
I think even Platon and people like that have moved over to digital now. Like, I think there comes a point, doesn't there, where you have to accept that, like, so in some cases, like £30-40 for film, let alone then developing it and the risk of it going wrong, and you know.
No, but the slowness. I mean, that's one thing you could say, because I did start out with. Well, I had an advertising agency, an internet company, and then I sold that. And one of the things I did was that I wanted to do interviews with entrepreneurs. So I'd go out, talk to them, whatever, 1, 2, 3, 4 hours, and write notes, and sometimes record it, but mainly make notes. And I wanted to take the photographs. You could see the soul of the person. And then the rewriting process of writing the article was maybe 3-4 weeks, which is kind of cozy in a way. Slow down things and everything, but actually a lot of work, but that's just how it was done. And on the photo side, you could say it was slide film, so that goes to the lab and then it comes back, and every photo in you scan takes maybe 20-30 minutes to clean for dust and look something. So that means you could say, imagine you do that every day, then you have a new interview every day, but you're working on previous ones. The moment you get digital, you just go out, you take the photos, and you go home, you import, and you're done. And now that thing is completely done, and then next day or later that day, you do something else. And that is something that I really like, to complete things in that way. And it's also, I mean, it's easier, business is easier to make money on that. It's just, that's just how it is, you know.
But it's also where good creative work comes from, right? Like, good creative work comes from completing iteration cycles and completing projects, because it's only when you go from beginning to end that you refine your workflow and refine your process. So, like, my background's in project management. So when you talked recently, especially, I loved your video about repetition in Japan, and about how freedom comes from being organized, because it was first of all, it articulated something that I think I'd felt for a long time, but had never found the words to describe. But you're right, like, and when you relate it to great creative people, you know, Paul McCartney, John Lennon, you know, Elton John, these are people who do the work, right? They get up, they put their shoes on, they go to wherever, they do the job, and then they come away again. And I think it's that repetition. And so digital, for me, in a way, if you can embrace that, and I think it's good that you talk so much about workflow, because that's key. If you can do it lots of times, that's how the great people get great. You know, I think it's a Macklemore quote, and it'll make me sound terribly daddish and old, but like, the greats aren't great because they were born able to paint, they were great because they painted a lot. When artists get together, they don't talk about art; they talk about where you can get cheap paint. And I think that's the key distinction for people if they want to, even if they don't want to make it their job, if they want to understand art and craft, you know.
Yeah. No, but I mean, there's nowhere where it says that just because something takes a long time that it's good, you know, and I mean, no, and I mean, completing things is somehow, well, it's very important if you're an artist or you're a creator, because it's so tempting to just start on something and then leave it and see maybe if you leave it in a drawer or in a closet for some years, then maybe it becomes better, and I can tell it doesn't. It's proven numerous times absolutely nothing happens. Only is that you pick it up again, you can't remember why you did it or what was the point with this, and then you kind of have to redo it, but it's never going to be what you made. And then you go back and look at history, you look at artists that, well, I mean, I think it's for every artist, it's for Henrik Sepesong, it's for Paul McCartney, it's for anybody, well, it is for any creator, is that you start on something, and especially the things that take a long time, that when you're almost done or when you complete it, it's almost like you're ashamed that it's not as good as what you now can do. Because every piece of art is a process that you learn something. And I tried it with comics when I did comics when I was a teenager, where it takes, I mean, if you work full-time on it, it takes maybe 2 or 3 days to make one page of on a comic. Yeah. An album is 50 pages or 48 pages. So even from top left corner of the page to the bottom right, it's like, wow, this is, you have to redo it, but you can't keep redoing it because you're never going to get anything published, you know. So, and it does look odd that I mean, that was of course the problem with that thing, is that it doesn't look consistently from page 1 to 8. It looks like it's a different person at page 8, you know, but that's just how it is, you know. And so it's almost, you could say, if you're a creator artist, or you could say anything, even if you make coffee or you have a factory, it's like, what can you can only sell or exchange finalized products. So you have to finish something. And the thing you made, now you know how to make it better, but that thing you made there is still great. And if you go back and look at Henrik Sepesong and you look at Paul McCartney and everybody like that, what they did back then, they might not be very proud of. They don't think it's very advanced, but that is often where the biggest breakthroughs are and the hits. And I usually joke with Henrik Sepesong because he did the Jumping Man. Within the first year, he had the Leica camera, and I was at the location, and there is not the fence anymore. But I can totally imagine he comes walking there, and he gets this idea: oh, there's water there, and people jump over the water, so I can maybe make a photo. And he has to do it through the fence, and he's a rangefinder. He's kind of new to this, so he doesn't really know that that you're going to have a blackout of 1/3 of the frame, but he has. So that also means that camera or that photograph is the only one that is cropped, and his most famous photograph. And there's so many things wrong with it from a later Henrik Sepesong perspective. But what are you going to do? That's the photo that everybody wants, you know. And I bet it's the same with songwriters and stuff. That they're ashamed of some of the banalities they did in the youth, but it's still people play it at weddings and everywhere. And that's just how it is. But I mean, it's, you say in that sense, that is the key, like finish stuff, and then you make the next thing, and you make the next thing. And well, you could say with computers, I mean, the computers we thought was great in year 2000 or 1995 is like, it's a joke now. They don't even have 1/10 of the power of an iPhone, you know. They're useless. And the screens are ugly, and it's just everything is wrong with them. But at that time, that was the shit, you know.
At that time, it was amazing. It was made of titanium. You know, some of them were like, you were like, oh, this computer that's made of titanium. It's amazing. Well, on the subject of made things and making things, we should probably at some point talk about some of your lens selections on the subject of products. What was your first lens that you were going to kind of mention of your 3?
Well, I kind of left it to the last minute. You did ask me.
It's more fun when that. Yeah, it's more fun when it's that.
Just ask, can you send me an email and tell me which lens are we going to talk about? So I actually don't know. you could say the short story is my favorite lens is 50 millimeter.
Yeah.
And you could say then why is that, or what's 50? But 50 in general, I mean, so one of the reasons to save it to the last minute is because I actually don't know. It's almost like packing a bag, traveling away for a month or a week or 2 months. It's just the day before something. Sometimes I'll just make a list of what should I bring of cameras and lenses, along with how many pairs of socks I think I need and so on, and how many cigarettes I should put in the suitcase.
Do the same.
So, and you could say in recent years what's end up being in the bag is just 50 millimeter lenses.
Right.
So I'll have 50 Noclux, I have 52.0, 51.4, maybe the 52.0 rigid from the old days, maybe the 7 Artisan 51.1. And then, for example, here I went to Japan. I thought I'm going to bring a 75 1.4 because we haven't been together for a long time, so let's just bring that. And then a 28 1.4.
Right.
And the reason I don't usually take anything but 50 is because I know I'm not going to use it. I used to pack like 10 years ago, I would have 35 and 50 and 90, and then sometimes I would go 21, 35, 50, 75, 90 or something.
Yeah.
And then I would just, the first thing I realized, like, I never used the 35. It's just,
right.
And I have the 50, I had the 35 spherical, the one is like $10,000 rare edition. I had the FLE also, and I had some others 35. And at one point I said, I'm not going to deal with 35 anymore. Just like this, it's stupid to have them, you know, or even pretend that I want to use them because I don't. And when I shot film, I would use my main lens was 81.4 on the Leica R system. So that's very Noclux looking, but it's also, you could say, very tunnel look, and especially when I got a digital back on, which Leica made this digital back, you could put a 10 megapixel digital back on the Leica R system, which is still an amazing piece of equipment, and the image quality is terrifying and amazing still, which is a different story. I'm talking with Leica now, like what's wrong with 60 megapixel? Why is 10 megapixels so great? Whatever. But on that one, the 80 millimeter would be cropped to 105 or something.
Yeah.
And I still managed. So you say I shot that almost as a 50. It didn't really make a big difference, and I could see here in Japan when I used the 75 1.4, it's basically a 50. It's just a matter of how many steps you walk further away. The look is the same. So that you can say that look of tunnel vision 75, 90, 50, that works for me. As soon as I go wide angle, it's 35, 28. 28 and 21 is fun because when you hold the line straight, when you hold the camera vertical upright, you have straight lines. So that's like, I want that. There's other photographs that I love. Everything is falling left, right, and center, and it looks very dramatic. Nothing has happened, but it looks super dramatic. That's not my style. It have to be very tight and straight.
Yeah.
And you could say almost naturally that's what you get with the 50. It's everything is like, it's controlled, it's straight, and so I don't have a deeper reasoning for why that is. I just know, and I did a video and an article of which lens are you. So I analyzed painters. So you look at Picasso, what focal length was his, because everybody have a focal length. So you have some painters would actually be 28 millimeter and some would be like 90 millimeter. I forgot what Picasso was, but it's in the article and the video. Yeah. So it's almost any person could say, no, I'm going to go with 85 or 40 millimeter, whatever. And that's just my thing. And all you could say, you just need one lens. But somehow you get enthusiastic and then you buy more lenses and more lenses, and a lot of, like I said, and a lot of people go to my website to find excuses why they need that lens. Which is, I actually don't say that. I say it's okay. Just whatever make you enthusiastic and gets you out to photograph, just get it. And in worst case, you're going to find out, I didn't need it, I didn't like it. But now you know you didn't like it and you know why. So you don't have to spend time on wondering about it anymore. So that's my attitude. And you can say also, I know from when the Leica M246 came out, the monochrome camera, I wrote a long article. I tested in Paris and elsewhere, and I wrote a long article, and I basically said, this is BS, this camera. It cannot handle the highlights. And I showed examples, and I did test gray cars. I said, this is not great. And then I remember clearly somebody sent me an email and said, I read your article about the M246. It's awesome. I just bought one. I'm like, okay, that's cool. Clearly, but it doesn't really matter. It's like, in a way, it's nice. I can say whatever I want to about a lens or particular cameras, and it doesn't really have any effect. It's not like Leica's going to go bankrupt because it says it has a bad sensor. People are going to buy it anyways and think it's awesome, or they're going to buy it and then later they're going to say, I liked it, but I agree with you, it wasn't that great, and I got the next one. It's like that's liberating in a way. It's not a big responsibility.
It now makes sense, why Milan wrote the piece on your website about the steel rim 35. Because I'm talking to him tomorrow actually, because he might be on a future episode. But it's funny because I'm a 35 guy. I really like 35. But it's funny you say about focal length. That happened to me with my first cameras I used as a kid, where they were basically, it was a Canon point and shoot, and it was a 35 f2.8 lens. And so just to me, that's what a photo looks like. It's that's hard coded in my brain. But then whenever I use a 50, especially, it feels a bit like cheating. It feels the extra compression and just the extra. I was talking to someone last week, and they were saying, "Oh, they're not sure about 50, and they don't like the." I was like, "Oh no, 50 gives this. I don't know. You're getting close to kind of portrait and a bit more background separation. If you've got if you start to go down like f2 or lower, you start to feel like it's very versatile. You can get you can take a photo of a lot of things, but it lends things a weight. It's a bit like films being displayed at 24 frames per second. Somehow there's just something about that focal length. I can totally see why for so long it was the go-to for a lot of people.
Well, I mean, I don't think it has to be. It doesn't have to be that deep, because I don't think about compression and stuff. Right. I just what I say, and what I think it is like, this is how I see the world, and that's usually how do I want to see the world today. What aligns, you can say, for whatever reason I see the world in 50. That's how I can, and you can say you're creating pictures. You're framing something, so that means you're excluding what is not in the frame. And you're isolating what is in the frame. That's the story, and you can say basically it should only be one story in the picture. You shouldn't try to tell that's a nice car, it's also a beautiful lady to the left, and then look at the tree behind. It's like, no, that's too much. Just there's one thing in it, and maybe all three things come together, so that's the story. So then they should be in the picture. But so it's a little bit like the pen is just what feels natural. You can say. Or everything else is kind of like excuses for getting the lens and whatever, or later. It doesn't really matter. It's just you sense there's a picture, and then you take the picture, and then that should match what you saw. And what I see is like I see the world a lot like Noclux or narrow depth of field. That's just how it is. And if I try to take that photo with a 35, I would be in trouble, Sometimes I do have to tell a 28mm story, and then I need to put on, for example, in Japan, I only used the 28 once, and also had the Q3 as backup that I didn't really use. But so I had one portrait I had to do, but then I had to have the guy sitting in a traditional Japanese table talking to another person, so I actually had to capture his whole room. So that was a 28, and that's what I used it for. So there it made sense. And then I remember I tried with the 21. The 21 Zoom Lux is an amazing lens, very cinematic and everything, but you put it on, you go from 50, you put on 20 on, you're just lost. You have no idea. Like the first photos you take, it's just everything is small and unimportant.
Yeah.
It's just, so you find, okay, you have to have something in the foreground, but there's also things you can do with a 21 you just can't do. So in that way, it's a challenge. You become a storyteller in a different way, and then you can learn to use that, and then you could also decide that's what I'm going to do the rest of my life. I'm just going to do 21. But it comes from what feels right for you, and that's kind of also almost like the day-to-day choice. You could say, if I just choose between the 50s, then you say I use the Noclux a lot, and I used it almost so much, so I'm tired of looking at my own Noclux photos. Right. Or I feel almost like, no, I should be able to do something with other lenses also, and for different reasons. But what the Noclux does is that it just blows out. You shoot at 0.95 or 1.0, whichever version you have. And I do believe it has to be a high quality photograph. You have to have detail and colors right, and exposure right, and everything. And straight lines, also vertical straight lines. But the freedom it has is that you can make it very dreamy, and you can make something that just blow people's socks off because they haven't seen a portrait or a street taken that way. It is like a dreamy lens, and somehow that just aligns with how I like to make that, and it makes it very exciting. You can say no matter what city or if you go indoor, what kind of photo you take, sometimes you forget how magic it is, and then if you put on the electronic viewfinder, or you put the Noclux on a SL camera with a built-in viewfinder, you walk out, or you start whatever, you get up in the morning, you walk out and you don't really feel inspired, then you look through the viewfinder and you say, wow, this is amazing. This looks so different than what I'm looking at. And then suddenly you get inspired to make something. And I had a guy at DreamWorks in LA, one of the guys that makes cartoons with Spielberg. So I visited them over there and looked at the stuff they were doing on the computers over there, or cartoons. And he was fairly new into photography. He was just locked in, like, no, I'm going to get like an M and a Noclux. And what he said is like, why would my job and my whole life is to make fantasy. So why would I get a camera where I can go f8, wide angle, and record every detail? It's like, it's just not me. It has to be dreamy. It has to be... and that's actually a good characteristic of what the Noclux does. It is also, in some senses, a little bit like cheating, because you have this lens and it kind of gives you the possibility to make something that just people can do with the iPhone, or they just, I mean, you almost need that lens. I mean, you can get similar things, but you can say if you want the dreamy look and the high quality and the detail and everything, then you have a Noclux. It's just like a Canon. Whatever else you can find, you just can't do it. It's just, it has to be that one. So that's a very, very, very unique lens. So that one, of course, I used a lot. Sure, Leica sold a lot of them. Not that they would ever recognize it, but they did. And then the funny thing is that when the Leica M came out digital, then came also the 51.4 spherical. That lens designer Peter Carper said this is actually an Apo lens, but it's so ridiculous to call it Apo, so we didn't write it on it. And what it means is just, and I had a lot of workshop students that used that, and one thing I recognize with that lens is like industrial design of it is the best, the most beautiful Leica lens on the M camera. It's just the balance of it is amazing. And I remember that I didn't like to use that lens because I thought it was too easy, or it was almost too perfect. So I used, when the M9 came out, I used the 50 2.0 rigid from 1957 almost exclusively on the camera. And it had this old school look and low contrast and everything. And there was no particular reason, because I had other lenses that was better, but that was the one I liked. And I had
Yeah.
workshops doing. They show up with a 51.4, and everything is razor sharp, high contrast. It looks amazing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, that's great, but that's not for me. It's just too. I mean, it's too predictable or too easy or something.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I mean, and it's fun. I mean, so I would sit and have meetings with Peter Carper at Leica. He's one of the guys I would meet, and I was just sit and talk lenses and pictures for an hour or two.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have questions about this and that, and then it would turn into an article or whatever. But he's a very interesting guy to talk to, and he's just very a genius in lens design, and he is like the only rock star they have at Leica. So we talk about this, and I almost can remember the moment where I'm like, I should be ashamed of myself. I actually don't use any of his lenses, like for real. I use all the lenses.
Yeah.
But I mean, he didn't seem to mind, and I kind of whatever. But at one point, I decided, okay, I'm gonna get a 51.4 Asperger. I mean, believe it or not, I didn't have it for whatever the first 10 years it was out or something. So I got that one, and I decided I wanted the brass one. Black chrome it's called. That is like a limited edition. It's made of brass. It's heavier, and the outer of it looked like the 50s. And after I got it, it's like, that doesn't make sense. Why would I have a heavier lens when the original one is lighter, and it actually what I had said for a long time, this is the most beautiful industrial design. Anyways, I kept using that lens, and that is kind of like, I would say, if you should pick a workhorse, that is the one, because it has. Well, one thing is, you can make with the 1.4, you can make the same look as a Noclux. I mean, I have so many pictures. I mean, even with 52.0, you can make pictures people think is a Noclux. But so you can do the Noclux dreamy look, and something is just you can't do with an iPhone, and most photo lenses it's just no, you can't. But this one you can, and it's super high quality, extremely high quality.
Yeah.
And it's compact, and you fit on the S, it fits on the M, and it's like it's just, that is an amazing lens, and in some ways that's almost like cheating also, because it's just so easy to use. It's not difficult to focus. It's not like, I mean, I don't think the Noclux is difficult to focus, but that's the normal perception, that it always very difficult. And the 51.4 is just like, anybody can use that lens, anybody can make magic and miracles with that lens, and super high quality. So that is, in so many ways, maybe the key lens of Leica. I mean, then you have the 35 FLE.
Yeah.
Is the other key lens. The rest is just for fun. You know, it's just to keep us keep the economy going.
Well, I suppose there's always going to be someone for one lens. I tried the Elmerit 28 a couple of years ago. I walked into London and tried it just on a bit of a whim. Mark, who I know, was in there and was like, "You should try this lens," because I was joking about how I didn't want to have a queue and didn't want to have another body. But the queue is worth the money for the lens on the front of it, if nothing else. You know, especially used, that camera is an absolute steal for almost whatever you pay for it, because the lens on it is so good and it's incredible. And so he said, well, why don't you try? Because for me, it's always got to be small. And actually, I was out. It was a beautiful night tonight. The house we have is surrounded by woodland, and I was out just quickly getting some photos of the sun setting before talking to you. And I put the Elmerit on, and it's a stunner, and it's very small, it's very compact, but it does have a beautiful rendering quality to it down at like 2.8 or even higher. Like I like to go around the range. I don't go wide open. I am a kind of wide, textured, detailed shooter. I like that, and I like to look at them quite big, printed and stuff, like to see kind of like, you know, the veins of a leaf or whatever, or, you know, like that kind of that kind of, I enjoy that. I did one of your videos I was watching in the preparation a couple of weeks ago, where you were like, you know, why would you zoom in? It's maybe nice for tourism. And I am an occasional pixel tourist, I think. But in general, I like my images to have a bit of texture to them, rather than a dreamy quality to them. But yeah, that Elmerit I think is stunning. But you're absolutely right that the lenses that sell the cameras are really, I think, 50mm Summoluxes. For the most part, because they're the ones that make people stop, aren't they, and go, wow.
Yeah, I mean, you can say, I mean, but again, I mean, it doesn't really matter what you can come up with of excuses for this or that or technical explanations. I mean, but I mean, factually, like the Leica M was made 450, so the whole rangefinder system and everything is forward based on a 50. But I mean, so I mean, now it doesn't really matter anymore with electronic viewfinder and everything. It's just like no. But it is kind of interesting. You say if you say anything is the mother of like an M, then it is the 50. And then the only reason I think the 35 is sold more than the 50. I personally think that's because they made a lot of package deals with the M6 that it came basically with a 35 millimeter. I mean, I don't really know, but I mean, but it makes totally sense. 50 and 35 is up there as the number one sold and most used lens because that's just they're great for that. And you can say if you do press, then you want wide angle. I think I said somewhere in the book that it's like you go to back when you went to the Vietnam War and you photographed, then you don't want to isolate the photo with a 50, no matter how beautiful it looks, because maybe the action is outside the frame.
Yes.
That's why you want a wide angle, so you're sure to get the photo that you're supposed to get. And a lot of press things is just like, no, you need some inventory in this frame, you know, and then you can crop it away and so on. But the fundamental thing of picking a lens, I think, is that's what. Well, buying it is what makes you happy, what makes you enthusiastic. And in the same way, you could say, when I pack a bag or I go out, it's like, what do I feel like? If I go away for a month, which lens is going to make me enthusiastic about this project? And the same, I mean, in the morning, then we go to a place called Escape Route here, where they have coffee and fresh juice, and it's like, and I take a camera with me, and I pick the camera and the lens for, this is what I feel like doing. I mean, then I have this odd thing sometimes that I have some new cameras or lenses that I feel obliged to test. I mean, which is actually annoying because it's not like I get the cameras or for free or anything. I buy the stuff and then of course I have to gain some experience with it so I can have a qualified idea for myself and others. And sometimes I have stuff where it's just like I know from this is BS. I can't wait to get rid of it because I'm going to hate it. But I should still have enough experience to know why is it that this doesn't work, and what is the thinking behind. How did that many people come up with something that is so lousy? And that maybe that's where I go back to my invented personality at some point. It's just like I don't really care. Just give me 10 megapixel and a good old lens, and I can take pictures. And in some ways, and that I was thinking about it yesterday or maybe today when you asked for this list of what lenses are we going to talk about, it's like, no, I actually don't really care what about the lens. I mean, and I do remember in Japan I would shoot actually a lot with the 75 on the M11P. And it's almost like, no, I don't care if it's 75 or 50 or which one I put on.
Right.
And I had the odd thing also. I actually sent my Noclux and a 50 Apo and some other stuff to Leica for adjustment. And then I thought I would get it when I get home, but then I actually had them sent to Paris. So I had them for the last week on my trip. And it's funny, when the things came back, they hadn't been with me for some weeks. I was like, it's almost a lost importance in the collection because now I'm playing with some new stuff. So I have to be happy for them again. But let's just take, you could say, if anything of a stirred lens, but at least like an interesting lens in this is the 50 Apo. That I mean, it's a ridiculous lens in many ways because it's a lens that Peter Carpe originally dreamt of making. And dreamt of making, if you go at Leica and you see some of the notebooks they have, and actually he will often, I've seen him several times, then he comes walking around, and he's not for any reason, it's not like I'm supposed to meet him, just see him walk around, and he walks around with a notebook from 1920 or something like that, or 1940. So these are the notebooks that the lens designers back then did. And you look at that notebook, and you see, somebody made a 75 1.0 or 90mm 1.0, which is totally unlikely to have made at that point, because you had a rangefinder with shade for the rangefinder, but the drawing, all the calculations are there, and you can say a lens designer can make that drawing with his fountain pen in this notebook, and he can see the picture.
Yeah.
And maybe he can also see, no, this cannot be done because whatever, we can't make that big glass types or whatever. But but you can imagine that one day it could be done. It's kind of like, it is science fiction because it's the technology that hasn't been realized yet and maybe never will be. So at that point, it is science fiction. So Peter Carper had his own science fiction project that he's like, no, I can make a small designed lens for the M system, and almost like one day we can grind the glass so precisely, and we can assemble the glass so precisely, so we can have extreme precision. So the amount of details I can get through this lens is going to be amazing. Yeah. And at some point, maybe end of 90s or beginning of 2000, I think the technology was there to do it if you really tried hard, or you made some new machines to grind and so on. But it was also obvious that this is going to be so expensive, nobody's ever going to pay for it.
Yeah.
Then they had a slightly out of control CEO for a couple of years, and I think it was 2003 or 2006, whatever. And he said to Peter, Peter, just make your lens, just do it. And then it went into prototyping and stuff. And when they finally released it, it was like a $7,000 lens. It was insane. It was basically...
Yeah.
Well, I guess at that point, that was more than an Oculus. And then you have just a waiting list just form up, 2-year waiting list, and people can't wait to get this lens that is extremely expensive. And when I got the first one of this, it's made a lot of aluminium and so on. And I remember I used it maybe the first time in Cambridge. I went to Cambridge University and photographed inside and outside there. And that was sort of my test of it. I was just like, this is actually a very boring lens. It's too perfect and it doesn't do anything. But then again, I was like, no, this is actually a great thing, because I have to make the photograph. It records exactly what I do. It doesn't add any special look or anything. It actually, and it has like, it doesn't even change the colors. Everything is as is. And that's a little bit, I mean, if you go in high fidelity or microphones and stuff, it's like, no, you have a microphone or you have something, it just records exactly this. It doesn't make your voice like, sounds like it's an old voice from the 20s, or it doesn't make it more perfect. It's just exactly as it is.
Yeah.
So you could say, in essence, that's the nightmare for any Instagrammer these days. You do a selfie and it actually looks like you look.
Imagine. Yeah.
That would be terrible. End of the world. But anyways, but in photography, that is actually cool. And some of the photos I took in Cambridge there, I looked at them and was like, no, this is like, I have to compose my photograph. I have to be a good photographer. I have the timing and everything right. And I have to have the correct tonality in the environment. I cannot, if I use a monochrome, it records the gray tones exactly as they are. And it also makes it, in that way, it makes it very old school. It makes like being a photographer in the 50s or something. It's like there is no help other than what you can make of the photographs, what you're gonna get.
Yeah,
and
nowhere to hide.
Yeah, so that lens, I kind of had it, and then I didn't really like to use it because I did feel that it was boring. That was the only excitement I could get from that lens, was that it puts me in the driving seat that I decide was being photographed, and I have to make the photograph. And sometimes you feel like that, but that's not how I felt every day. And I did feel it's too hyped and too perfect. And a lot of the hype of it is that you photograph with this, and especially it was kind of made for the monochrome, and the promotional photo I did for the monochrome was some Danish Magnum photographer that photographed something in Greenland of the ice and a village, and then you blow it up, it's a whole wall, you can see a face of a child down in the valley. I'm just like, I'm not doing stuff like that, so I don't really care how much you can blow it up. I do see that it's very interesting, and it's fun to buy a lens, and you can show your spouse or whoever that this is why you pay 7,000 for it.
I would not
It
be
becomes
married for very long if I did that. If
no.
I was like, Alice, come look at these blown up I photographed the children at the end of the drive. But look, you can
Yeah.
see their faces.
Yeah, no, but it's like, anyways. But you could say it does. If you look back and say okay, that is like we're back. The monochrome came out 2012, and I think the Apple came about the same time, almost as if it was made to beat out the details of that. But the longer perspective Peter Karp and the lens designer have makes sense. That no, this is like this goes to 150 or 300 megapixel cameras. That's like. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but at least the resolution is there in the lens and the perfection. And it's also like a masterpiece that he made. So that lens I tried to, both like the 51.4, I tried to love it because I feel obliged that I should also like that lens now that they put so much effort into making them. And the same with the 50 Arbor, so I would try to make stuff with, and kind of always came out with a conclusion: it's too perfect, it's too boring, and sometimes you do need that accurate detail and color, like for product shots or something like that. And then at some point when they came up with a Leica historical edition in brass and black paint, and they only made 300 of them, and I got one of those. Right. And at that point it cost the same as the other one, so I was just out with that and in with that one, and now suddenly it became more my lens because it had this 50s look. And then, so that one I've used quite a lot, and it's almost like it feels there's not a big difference between the days where you put on the 50.95 or 51.4 or 52.0. I kind of get in the same old school mood, so maybe it's more like it has to be old school than it has to be anything else, and fundamentally, I know I can do anything with a 50. I could basically do anything with any lens, But it's almost like they have more my identity. It's kind of like all my 50s have like the Oculus is not. Well, it is from some years old. I can't remember when the Oculus came out. It was 2008.95 or 9, something like that. And the two others, I almost pretend is lenses from the 50s that. Yeah. Some old lenses, and somehow that is what it has to have for me to like a lenses. I have to feel that I'm in some important mission in the 50s to record for the future or something. I mean, I don't know what it is, but you could say whatever gets your juices going. That's basically that's what I'm for myself, and also for anybody else. Is like, no, if you think Fuji is great and that makes you walk out and do evening photos, that's what you should do. You should not have a queue or whatever, and then it's up to people to convince their wives or whoever else they need to convince that they really do need this is the only right thing. That's my stand on it.
I think you're right. My stepdad has been talking about buying a queue, and he's basically hunting around it. He has a small camera, but it's that thing. It's that interesting thing about Leica, and this podcast is in danger of becoming a Leica and Polaroid podcast because everyone I talk to is effectively the Q always comes up, even if you're talking to someone who shoots with different camera systems. They're like, oh, the Q, but he's basically talking about he wants a small camera for travel, ideally a bit weather sealed. Ideally, he'd like a sort of wider angle, but the ability to crop in. And it's like, well, unfortunately, this all roads point to the Q. Like that is just what you should get. And instead he's got an A7 CR and he's bolting other lenses. And I think he actually prefers the Sony system. And so in the end, he's kind of talked himself around in circles a bit like you with the M4P, where he will keep circling it. And maybe one day he'll land and maybe he won't, but we'll revisit it.
Yeah, I mean, my experience with the Leica M, which kind of like almost for a long time was the only system. Now there's so much to choose from. But my experience with I have the people that come in my workshop and or people I know. So I know people. Well, I will meet people occasionally that they don't have the money for like M, but still they have 3 of them and they have lenses and they love it. And you wonder how did that happen? But I would make it happen too. If I want something, I'll get it. Somehow. And then I will also, and that's the interesting thing, I will meet people that they could buy 5 Leica M's a month. And they talk about it. I have one guy specifically, a management consultant from Germany, and he's like, "Oh, the M9 with 90, that's all I need in life," and that's amazing. And he talked about this shit for 10 years. Have you bought one? No, he hasn't. He still have a Digitalux 2. And I'm like, can you just go down, just put your credit card on, or you whatever, find the money under the mattress and just pay for it. But he can't get himself to do it,
Right.
And I can relate to it in cars because I'm not big on cars, and I wouldn't spend a lot of money on cars. It would just feel wrong for me, out of character or something, So in that sense, I get it. Then you could say the Q. That way, I'm not a big fan of the Q, but the Q comes in handy because you just hand people a Q and say, "Hey, try this one," or look at the Q, and then most likely they're going to end up getting one because they just can't resist. But then comes the good thing: they had it for 3 weeks. Now they dream of a Leica M, and suddenly they have a Leica M. So you don't have to. They do it all by themselves, basically.
Yes.
And I've seen this router many times. And I have one guy here locally that he actually have a lot of Fuji and Sony, and he's kind of a nerd, and he's very much into photography. But he also has suitcases full of Russian lenses and everything that he bought and refitted. So he can really see the idea of making something special and not traditionally. Then about a week ago, we talked, and he had a Q for 3 weeks.
Right.
And it's like, I'm getting a Q2. Or the question was, should I get Q2 or Q3 or whatever? I said, get the Q2. And he's just like, I'm going to sell all my cameras. I don't need it. I looked at the pictures. It's just, no, I need a Q.
Right.
And I know what the next is going to be, but I didn't.
Yeah.
I deliberately didn't warn him.
We know where this story ends. I did that. I started looking at the Q for years and talked myself in and out and in and out, and then eventually actually skipped the Q and just went straight to the M, which was the right move, because I think, like you're saying, I would have stayed there for a while, but the versatility, I do like to change perspectives periodically. I do like to swap lenses, but more importantly, the feel of this thing is tremendous. And the only thing, I had an M10 and I upgraded to the 11, and it was because I don't travel as much as you. I think you're one of the hardest working people in photography. It's crazy seeing you're here and you're there or whatever. But the USB charging on it is huge for me. So it's funny thing about the 11. It'll be interesting to see what you think of this, but it's better than the 10 in every way, and I don't love it as much. And it's a funny thing. It's much higher resolution. There's the USB-C for the charging. There's much longer battery life. All of the things. Yeah. I think it corrected a color cast that I didn't quite like in the 10. I think I kind of prefer the colors in the 11. But there is, and it's lighter, which is amazing. But there is just something that is not quite. I love it, but it doesn't kind of capture. If I had that, if the house was on fire and my old M10 was still here next to the 11, I might pick the 10 up, and I don't know why.
No, but I think that's fair enough. So that's so there are several things to that, because you could say so we go back to the Q. There's the original Q from 2015 that actually I talked to dealers, and then when nobody can hear them, they say, I like the original Q I like the pictures better. Yeah. I like that one, also like the Q2, and then Q3 is like, no, I'm not that fascinated. But overall, I'm actually not that fascinated with the Q. But and I will pick the M any day because it feels more like making a photograph. I did have a period here some 9-12 months ago where I was thinking like, somehow here in Florida where it's so hot sometimes and whatever, I was just like, maybe I get a Q2 reporter, and that's it. That's just I can't deal with all these lenses and stuff. I'm just gonna go very simple, like almost not wearing a camera, but just I have it, and then make it work. And I think the key in that for me is that no, the Q2 reporter is a special camera. It feels like I could make it my friend, just like that lens have to be a 50s version to be my lens. And with the M11 repeated, I mean, so you could say the short review of M11 is, it's just not a great camera. That's like the bottom line. And you could say with not a great camera, it's basically the image quality is not good. That's my take on it. And I'm doing different articles and I have different talks with people. Why is that? And you could say, well, the M10 is the camera that worked. It's like 7, 8 years in production. No problems. And it just keeps shooting and somehow we made it work. And then you can also have the viewpoint, no, I'll make the M11 work. And you can, but why would you go through all that work to get something to work when you had something that actually did work? But then I also did, so I had the M11 in silver and I didn't have any problems with freezing camera or anything. There was a few things with the shot in the beginning they fixed and then that's fine in the firmware. But I didn't have any of those problems. I had problems with the image quality and the whole feel of the camera. And I'm kind of, okay, when I'm done with my articles and my videos in this camera, I'm gonna throw it out. I'm just like, find some kid on the street, say, hey, you want this? Take it, just run away. Just make sure he doesn't live in my neighborhood or something, you know. And then the funny thing happened that then I saw, it's crazy, I saw on Instagram a story from Leica store in New York, and I see they have a black M11P with Kevlar on it.
Yes. And
I'm like, I write to the store man, or I write to the Instagram, the store manager, Rob there, and I say, what the fuck, what the hell is this? And I said, M11P, we made some with Kevlar. I said, how much is it? And I said, that's the same price as the other one. I was like, wow. And then I'm like, why would I get more M11s if I don't like one, why would I get more? But, and then I talked to him and said, no, they made 6 black and 6 silver with Kevlar. It's not a strictly limited edition. I mean, for all I know, they could start making 2,000 of each, but for now they just made that for the opening of the store. And I'm saying, okay, that's it. What? And then I tried to talk myself out of it as best as I could to ask, what do you have of serial numbers to see if you had some really bad ones, so I didn't need it or some reason. And it's like, well, okay, that's it. I'll take that one. And the reasoning for myself is like, okay, I will try to love this camera. Let me get one where I actually feel like, wow, this is my camera. And this is, the Kevlar is my camera. But even I got it, I had it on my table for a week. Untouched. I didn't put in an SD card. I didn't do anything. I just had it lying around because I'm like, no, I'm going to return this. This doesn't make any absolutely sense. And then I decided, okay, that's it. Now I'm taking off the plastic of the bottom plate or whatever there was, and then I'm just going to shoot the hell out of this camera. And I almost shot exclusively with it for a month in Japan and Paris and London.
You were spotted. Tokyo Camera posted that picture of your camera, which I saw this evening, just as I was doing the video.
Funny.
Message John,
So somehow I can like it, and the funny thing is that camera actually started freezing in between, and I changed the S card, and it's freeze maybe 1 of 1,000 pictures. Before there was like 1 of 100 or something. So apparently going from 300 megabyte a second to 280 megabyte a second cards helps. So I don't know if it's fixed in the largest firmware. And then there's just the colors and the exposure. But I mean, fundamentally you can make it work. And even you can say the assignments I did, I sent raw files to the magazine, and each portrait have at the beginning gray card, and then I'll just see what they're going to make out of it. And so far they haven't said anything. But I mean, you can make it work. It's just not, it doesn't feel completely right. But then again, you could say you can make anything work, you know. But I do love, like, the M10P is, in my opinion, the camera. It has silent shutter. It's been well tested for 7-8 years now, and it's 24 megapixels. Pictures is easy. And then we get into the next thing, and that's what I'm doing now. I'm like working on looking like, why is it that a 28 1.4 looks great on M10 and it doesn't look that great on M11 with more megapixels? And there's like reasons why it's almost like light is spilling over into the next pixel and so on, whatever. And I'm talking to lens designers and everybody and their mother about it. And then you go, and then also at the same time, I go back and I look at like M240 pictures. I see pictures on my website. Oh, that's an Oxus. Wow, that's really crisp. I said, that's the M240. I'm like, how come the M240 have so crisp pictures? And you could say the short thing is maybe that when you have that like M240 and you have some lenses made for that camera that works really well for it, that's the kit you're supposed to have. Then you go M11, 60 megapixel, or the next one, 120 or 200 megapixel. Maybe they don't do a favor to a lens like the 50 Arbor is designed for the future, so but nobody really knows. Peter Carpet doesn't really know how it's going to look on those lenses because they're not made yet. But so maybe they're going to look, at least in theory, they should look great on that one because the lens have the resolution. But can the sensor handle light? And then you get into also the guys that design the image quality from the sensor. Do they even know what they're doing, or is it like anything else in the world that they make a new sensor because they have to make a new one? So I have stuff to say about that, and there's going to come some interesting articles about that. I have been back and into Oscar Barnack, what he would have done and stuff like that. Because the fundamental, it's very simple. Like a camera is, you take pictures. So the most important thing is the image, and not if you can charge it with USB or if you can update it via Wi-Fi or stuff like that. That is how you sell stuff these days. But that's not really, But that's a thing. But you say So in some ways, I will go a long way to find something that I love to use and make it work. But it is part of making something work is that you feel attached to it. You feel this is my lens or my camera or something like that.
That camera does look great, and I think it's all about what inspires you to pick it up. Like if you like it and you're excited by it, I think you've said it a few times. Like that's the key. As long as I do get excited when I pick it up. There was a Hugh Brownstone quote from years ago when I first got my M. I was thinking about it, and he was saying, you raise it to your eye, and it has this kind of talismanic quality for him, where he can't be rational or objective about a Leica camera. And so that whole thing of my M10 arrived, and I bought it used, and I was so excited. This massive box arrived at the house, and I got it out of the box, unwrapped everything. It's freezing cold from being in the box, I remember. And I stuck a memory card in it, stuck the lens on the front, and held it up, and was just like, "Oh no, I'm a goner!" Like the minute that I heard that shutter go, and looked through the rangefinder for the first time, I was like, "Oh no, I'm gone now." Whatever, it's going to be one of these for a long time now. Like I could just tell. But I think are you optimistic about the future of this? Do you think it's because it's just going to be resolution and stuff that we don't need?
No,
it feels like to me.
I'm pretty sure. The M12 is going to be like the M10 in relation to the M240. So M240 has video and more buttons and so on. In retrospect, it was a shock, but it's actually a nice camera. It's very good. It's a good deal also now, and it does the job. And then you have M11 just went completely nuts. And M12, it has to be, what can you remove on this one? You could say that, the SL3 is a different story. It's a different line. I think there's a lot of beautiful, smaller cameras, and the design of the menu is amazing.
Yes, I agree.
Car producers should learn from how to make nice displays from them, or nice design of lettering and everything. I think there's too many choices and everything in it. And I think the M is the one where you say, okay, what can we remove of buttons? Do we really need this button? Do we really need this menu? Some of the stuff they added in the M is hard to get rid of again, because now it's become part of what people expect from a camera. But there's a lot of
Yeah.
And I mean, that's how it's been going, like user profiles and whatever else they put into it. It's just like, come on, just skip it, you know. But now you have people that, if they skipped it now because it was just not really necessary, then you're going to have 100 emails from people who complain. And some of them know a baron somewhere who knows somebody else, and then they have to put it back in. So how can you simplify it? Maybe move all this stuff, and they try it with a simple menu, which is not how it should be. It's almost like, can you just make a camera and you can add more menu if you want to. You can download more menus, but keep it simple. Yes. So I think that is the way it has to go, and it is true. You have this that it is like a talisman. So it's like there's just something about this product that is right. And I mean, the amount of grown-up people with too much money I met who's just like, this is really improved my life quality. I'm so happy for this.
Right.
And it's not like they don't have anything else. I mean, they could buy airplanes or cars or whatever, but this is something they like because it feels right.
Yeah.
And that's how we have it with very few things, actually, through our life. That maybe I mean, my first car was a Beetle, and I know it's useless, but there was something about having it. And I think also Porsche is like,
I was going to say Porsche.
Would be nice to have in the garage and look at it. You don't necessarily have to drive it, but just you have it. You maybe just put it in the living room, you know, and leave it there. So when you find something like that, you have to hold on. I mean, one thing, you have to have it, but you also have to hold on to it.
Yeah.
And you have to find a way to appreciate it. And then you could also say with cameras, you can just like my M11P Kevlar, maybe that will be the suspense of it. Did we become friends or not? Or because that was the aim of it. Let's see if we can reboot this relationship and make something out of it. But then you could say it's a beautiful camera to have on the shelf. Then, and especially touching the Kevlar is amazing. That's part of the experience. So maybe that's what I have, and then I use something else to take photos with. You know. Or if it's really great, then it's like something you have with you all the time and you think it's the best ever and so on. That's like, I think the great thing with an M camera is like you can actually make photographs with it and you can have it with you. You can even talk about it with people, some people. So that makes it an extremely unique product.
It was funny you were talking about like talismanic design and things, and like the 911 stands out to me as one of those designs that kind of very subtle refinement and changes and improvements over time. And in a funny way, this whole conversation has been very much about product and refinement, and like, you know, a lot of like, you know, this version was good, but then this one was this. And I think that's what's I find that really fascinating. Like you can see it in that way. You're making dreamy pictures. You're making very painterly kind of like conceptual images a lot of the time, but you are acutely aware of how it works, right? And all of these things are connected. And, you know, that lens got made because they had a mad CEO and he just said yes when you wouldn't necessarily say. And so occasionally you get these little sparks and these moments. And I do agree with you that 11 has been not smooth sailing for them, you know, when they know it. Like, you go in the stores. When I had my 10, I went to LA for the first time. No, San Fran it was. And Wayne in the San Francisco store was like, the M10's a great system. You know, without hesitation, you know, he just knew.
No, but it is, and also, I mean, there's a lot of things in it because, I mean, I don't know, but it's like some of the impression and the things I hear is like, no, the M11 is not moving, you know. It's like, and that also means you want to sell an M11 secondhand, then So anyways, but it's just, I mean, that's how it is. I mean, the only thing that really counts is, can you get it to work? And I think even you get something that you're like, no, this is not how I want it, but can you get it to work? But then you can say, I think it's fully valid. It says, no, I don't want to deal with it. I just don't like it. So let's say, I mean, you do have like, if we look at 911 also, you have like, then you have the electrical one. It's like some people like, oh, this is the most amazing. It does feel like a real Porsche. But for whatever reason that you decide, no, I need this one in this color, and I have to have this steering wheel, and I have to have this extra sound. That's And once you have all this, it basically gets down to just driving. Just like photograph just comes down to, I just want to take pictures.
Yeah.
But those rudiments of fundamental thing have to be right, especially if you know about all the possibilities, and especially also if you have the possibility to just buy whatever you want to.
Yeah.
Then you really want to simplify and not deal with the crap. You just want something that this is how I want it.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's actually funny that I hadn't thought about that before, but that's very true. I mean, if I go back and look at the workshops when the M9 came out, the first full frame, I noticed how they were very different people, but they're very similar. So a lot of the things that had cars and the bags and the phones and the way they travel and everything, it was very specific. I mean, they would exchange knowledge like, no, I found this notebook cover because it does this and that, and it doesn't have this, and it doesn't say a name, and it's like this and that, and I know this guy, he made it for me or whatever. And then 3 or 4 other guys like, that's the one I want. And then they would go buy it, And so in that way, the Leica M crowd is very specific in the way that they made a deliberate choice. They were looking for this, and they recognized this is the right thing. And then they don't have to buy a new edition or something. But of course, you get into that a little bit, and somehow you feel, because that is how it is supposed to be, that the new iPhone and the new Leica and the new lens and so on is better. And that I mean, it keeps the economy going, and it gives you something to. Gives you walking down to the camera store now and then. And,
if we want an M12, I suppose people had better buy M11s, because otherwise we won't get an M12 or an M13. I guess.
Well, M12 is coming no matter what, and you could say also, I mean, despite the M11 problems or whatever, or disagreements, they're milking it to the last bit with without screen, and maybe they're gonna make the one with built-in EVF on this one also. But
we can save an EVF for that's a whole evening of a conversation over a pint, isn't it, as to whether or not it's even an M at that point.
It is an M on that point.
Yeah.
I mean, the mesh circle is just, that's the name of the camera, but it basically means distance measurement, and you have to measure the distance with the focus somehow or another. You could say it's almost like if you had autofocus, then that would be a different story. But if you look for a rangefinder or this, but it makes it easy to get the result, but it makes it maybe less of this Tallyman feel. But I mean, that has to be individual. But I think the choice should be there, and I think that I have grown to see that's a version to make. And if we can make one without screen, we can make a P version, and we can make a monochrome version, then we can also make one with built-in VF. And they kind of said if you can sell enough, which supposedly like 800 or 1,000, then we'll make that too. But there is a lot of resistance internally, and the product manager, Stefan Daniel, who is the overall product manager of all the products, says, no, it's going to be all my dead body. It's always going to have a rangefinder. I'm like, that's bullshit. And it is. But maybe it's a good story. I mean, maybe then you could say it could be, and I mean, I don't think Rolex made any digital watches, so it's just like, no. A Rolex is a mechanical watch, and so is a Leica. Not because it wouldn't be nice to have electronic Rolex, but it's just you can buy another one. This is mechanical. So that's a standpoint, it's a positioning in the market that no, we're just old school. We don't do that. So that could be the reason. But marketing wise and photography wise, there's no reason not to make it with building.
No, of course. Yeah, you could put anything in it. I think it's the corner they live in, right? Like they've got to carve out a space for themselves, and they've full frame for the most part, with the exception of the new Deluxe. But like full frame, the M is the M, the SL line is the kind of modern mirrorless camera. For if you've got to do a shoot, if you're doing it professionally, hooked up to loads of lights, things like or whatever, and then the Q is the gateway drug. And then they all have something about them that means it's just hard enough to create that same kind of experience. They're just positioned. If you want to make a Q, you can fudge and make your own Q out of other cameras, but it won't have a 1.7 aperture lens that's that good. It won't. There's always something.
yeah, the whole package of the Q is they hit on the nail. I mean, the designer who did it is like, I mean, it's a group effort, but that he managed to just keep it that simple and functional at the same time. That's a perfect balance. And and you say in that design the flip screen doesn't fit in, but now it's there and whatever. But that's fine. And in the same way, you can say the M is just made so perfect from the beginning that it's just variations over it, you know.
No, hit the nail on the head, which is probably, because I've just realized we've been talking for an hour and a half. This has been wonderful. I've really enjoyed this. You've been very generous with your time, but that's probably a lovely note to end on. So I'll let you go and get on with the rest of your day. And it's the afternoon now, so I guess you've had your coffee and juice.
Yeah, and I had the family. We have some people from Holland here and Chicago, and we had also from Denmark, and the house has been full for the last 10 days. So they went to the beach and they just came back and they're going to shower, and then we're going to go down the road here in 20 minutes and then have dinner and stuff there. So they're like,
amazing.
So that's what you can hear in the background is all the showers are going in the whole house.
Yay! Oh, good. Well, it's nice having a full house. I mean, you get that quiet when they've gone, but it's nice to have folks visiting, because where we live in the middle of nowhere. Yeah.
Family is great. It's also takes some energy and time, but it's great. I mean, it's just this, you know. So I like both.
Yes. No, same.
But here I get to stay home and work. So they go to the beach. So they're like, okay. So that's okay. We divide like that.
Let me know how you get on with your film photography and getting your neighbour to develop it for you, because it feels like you've got a good lab down the road. Like this, I think you could make this work.
Maybe have him do it. I always dreamt of not having to deal with it. Just take the photos and get the final result.
If you've got a happy amateur right down the road, you know.
That's true. I hadn't thought about that.
Oh, there you go. A free gift. Cool. Amazing to talk to you, Thorsten. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, and good to. Where are you exactly? What city are you in now?
So we're in a place. Well, I live in a village called Nethybridge. So we're near. We're north. I don't know how well you know bits of Scotland, but we're near Aviemore or Inverness. So very, very northern Scotland, and I live in. I like to joke that it's, as the Germans say, das Mittel von nowhere. Like, it is the middle of nowhere. It's just completely just surrounded by trees, and it's tremendous, but it is far from everything. So when I travel a lot for work, and so it's great to like come back to here to recharge. It's quiet. It's very rural. Lots of countryside, deer in the garden, things like that. And then I can go to cities and see, meet different people and see things. It's tremendous.
No, I like that. I mean, here where I'm in Florida is a little bit not the same, because there is a lot of people around, but it's really spread out and it's very nature and private. I have looking at the woods here to my left side. And I tried also in Denmark when I had the internet company. We moved out to a former windmill factory, which was like a farm turned into a windmill factory, and then that's where we had the internet company. And it was just totally silent out there, and I mean, it took 15 minutes to drive to the shop to buy groceries, so it was isolated, not extremely isolated, but still nice, and I still like this. I mean, because a lot of the things I do is just leave me alone and just sit here and write and smoke cigarettes and drink coffee. I don't need impulses from the world,
Well, I think we can get them more easily than we used to as well. They come to us more. I think there was a guy I used to watch his videos on YouTube, and he was in marketing and like ran an agency, and they were always based in Soho in London, because you wanted to be there, and that was where you saw things, and that was where you saw an emerging trend, or you saw like, oh, people are wearing things that way, or they're doing this. But increasingly, he just didn't need to be there anymore. And this was pre-pandemic. This is sort of 2017, 2018. He's like, I'm paying a huge amount of money for a studio space in Soho, which is eye-wateringly expensive. And so it just makes, if you're running your own business, it makes that base that you have to cover just that much bigger before you even get started, before you've done anything.
Yeah, but I also think that's almost like if you're a teenager, young, you want to be part of... we call it here FOMO, fear of missing out. So you have to go to all the parts. You have to be trying this trend and this trend. And as you get through that and you get all, you just leave me the fuck alone, you know. Just
Yes.
I'll come. Don't call me. I'll call you. You know.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
you can go to the mall, or you can go to Paris if you want to shop, or and now you can also, here it's very easy with Amazon. I mean, I order
Yeah.
Nespresso coffee. I have it 3-4 hours later with Amazon. It's insane.
That's crazy.
Yeah, there must be a warehouse nearby, because
Sure.
a lot of stuff we get within hours and everything else next day.
Yeah.
So that makes your lifestyle a little bit different in terms of shopping, you know.
It does. No, it does. I mean, our children are learning nothing, right? I've got 2 boys, 6 and 10, and they're learning nothing about, like, you know, what it's like to actually have to go and do things and get it, because it all just arrives. And maybe that's the future, and maybe it will always be that way from now on. But the infrastructure, you know, and what they would do if it suddenly didn't arrive, I don't know. I worry I'm not teaching them.
It will probably
that
happen in between, but yeah. No, we talked about it yesterday, the day before, that it's almost like you should do a photo project in the supermarket. Go in the supermarket and take photos, and like here in the US we have Whole Foods. I know there's one in London, but it's big here, you know. Go take pictures of people shopping in Whole Foods, and they look at the milk, they look at the shelf, try to decide which olive oil they're going to buy. And it doesn't seem very sexy, but in 50 or 100 years, people are going to ask, and what the fuck is a supermarket? And then you have pictures, you can see this is how you used to spend time looking at olive oil.
Yes.
And decide should I have 1 or 2 butter.
Yeah.
It didn't come with a drone or whatever the story is in 50 or 100 years, you know. So that's, and I mean, that's also, it's not something I think a lot about, but I know that is a fact, that you take a photograph and they go up in value in terms of, like, in 10, 30, 100 years. It's like it's much more interesting to look at a historic great photo than it is to look at current great photo, you know. At least I like to dream myself into that.
Yeah. Well, I talk about that with our work, you know, because we've the studio I work for is now 50. It's going to be 15 this year. I work in video games, and so we've been around for 15 years, and we've just moved into a new building, which is an amazing new building, and they've spent millions kitting out this building to make it a really great place to work. It's a really great studio environment, and I keep trying to get them to, well, let me or someone do a lot of documentary photography, because there's almost no documentary photography. So do you know Doug Menwes' book Fearless Genius that he shot in the 90s? So I'm interviewing him next week, I think, but he basically was with Steve Jobs said he could photograph Next, which was the company he founded after Apple. So he's there, and he shot about 250,000 images over maybe 3 or 4 years. And the book is fantastic. It's got, like, a very young Jeff Bezos in it, and Bill Gates, and all these people who were in Silicon Valley, the founders of Adobe, all these people who were, like, instrumental in shaping large portions of the world today. And there's no documentary style, like, crazy hardcore tri-X black and white photography of video games, of making, and yet this is a dominant art form. It's one of the biggest art forms in the world. It's hugely popular, and there's no photography of it. I think in part because it's so secretive, and also potentially it's the actual making of the thing can be quite dull to look at in ways. You'd have to work quite hard to kind of get the trust of people making things together, because actually, especially the big industrial games, it's rooms full of people sitting, concentrating for hours on end and not moving a lot, and, like, focused on solving really hard problems, you know.
That's also cool. It's almost like a Matrix moment, you know.
Yes,
they're making the Matrix, I mean, in a way, but
but I'm trying to sort of sell the studio on the concept of, we want these photos now, because that industry is moving so quickly. The way we do it now won't be the same as the way we do it in 10 years from now, and we want those photos of what it was like now to capture that moment.
Yeah, that's great for storytelling in the future. I mean, you could say there was now I lost his name, but I photographed him in New York. I wanted to preserve him, so what he did, he back when he's the one who did the Bob Dylan freewheeling cover.
Oh, right.
I just can't remember his name now, but whatever. But back when the Columbia CEO, Columbia Music, said, we need somebody to photograph the recording in our studios, and the musicians, when they go on tour, we need somebody to document that. For whatever reason, he said that, and that became this guy. So he had full access to Nina Simone, Simon Garfunkel, Bob Dylan. He went on tour with them, and he photographed them. And that visionary CEO is like, no, we should take photos of this, because they might just come in this week and then in 3 weeks they're forgotten or whatever. But some of them are going to make it, and those who make it suddenly have pictures from however they wrote the songs back then and how they worked and how they looked. And I'm totally for that. I mean, yeah, I even did like projects in Denmark where I would photograph every year, would set aside I think 3 or 4 days to photograph upcoming musicians on a festival, because nobody fucking knows them, but I could put them on Get Image, and there was kind of some acknowledged that they would be in a picture archive, and some of them are going to rise to stars, and some of them did, you know. And I go back and look like, wow, she looked so silly in that dress back then. Now she's all pimped up or whatever. And yeah, I think it's a big part of being of photographing. You want to preserve some uniqueness of the moment, you know. And that uniqueness grows as we move on, because in 10, 20 years, the keyboards and the rooms and everything is going to look different than what it did then. And then it's going to be like, wow, was that how it was done, you know?
Yeah. And it's like you were saying earlier about computers.
Yeah, they might not sit in the same room in 20 years, you know. They're just sitting in Starbucks around the world. I don't know, you know. But so just that image is worth like, wow, we should have taken that photo, you know. So maybe it's getting taken and it's not released. That's fine, you know.
Yeah. At least it exists somewhere. I hope to get it. That's my. I think the more I think about it, unfortunately, I would have to leave my job probably to have the real kind of disconnect freedom to also make the images, and to kind of, because you want to catch the bad stuff too. Like you want to photograph the bad bits as well as the good, you know, and it's hard to do when you work with people at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, you photograph everything, and then later you decide which one you're going to use and not, if it's good for whatever, for people in it or for the general thing. But you don't not take photos or avoid it.
Yeah,
anyway,
catch
so
it first.
that's I like that project. I mean, anything documenting and preserving, I like it. I mean, that's just
yeah. No, definitely.
That's
Well, I
beautiful
shall clip this bit of the conversation and send it to my bosses and go, see, you know, someone who knows what they're talking about thinks it's not just me.
Yeah, but if you look at the book there with Bob Dylan and Garman and Garfunkel from before anybody knew what it was, it's just like, and now a lot of it is historic pictures, like in publication, as if like there was always the intention. No, it wasn't. Nobody cared what the fuck Bob Dylan was doing back then, because it was just some hillbilly with a guitar.
Yeah.
And now it's like some of them are the key photos, you know. And that's often, and you say you go back, Henrik Song, some of the best stuff he did before he was known by anybody. And that goes for a lot of artists, that nobody cared what they did back then when they did the best work. And now it's like the essence of what they're known for. So, okay, good. I will move on here with the family. I can hear they're getting ready somewhere there. So,
they're getting restless. You better go and sort them out. Thank you so much, mate.
Thank you.
You can rate and review this series on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and that'll help people to find the show. You can also sign up for a midweek newsletter that I've started doing. You can get that at ianfarrell.com/sign-up, and there is a link to it in the show notes as well. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.